I've been hearing the clamoring for TCU to pursue James Franklin, but let's address the two elephants in the room first. Oh, yeah, it's Locked On Horned Frogs. Play my music.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Horned Frogs podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything TCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darrion Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South. 817 Rays, and today's episode is brought to you by Mazda. Like our players, we sweat every detail. Because when you make every move count, pulling off the unexpected is only the beginning. Stay tuned later for highlights in this week's Moving the Game Forward, Mazda Move and Be Moved. Now, we're going to get abstract to kick this thing off, but we're going to wrap up today's episode with a look at the biggest pregame narrative that I was pushing, and that was TCU's inability to manage themselves and stay calm in hostile environments. It popped up again, and it's no longer just a small talking point. Segment 2, we're going to take a look at what I think, in my personal opinion, was the turning point of the game in the moment that TCU lost, and it was well before the clock hit triple zeros. But like I said, we're going to kick this thing off a little bit abstract, a little bit not directly related to TCU, or we're going to make the biggest news in college football over the weekend a Horned Frogs topic because the fans have made it a Horned Frogs topic. That's James Franklin being let go by the Penn State Nittany Lions. I want to make it very clear. I've heard the clamoring for TCU to pursue James Franklin. I think there are two elephants in the room when it comes to that pursuit, and we'll address both. But one thing needs to be very clear. This is not a new shiny object clamoring. This is not the desire to go get James Franklin just because he's James Franklin. You have a head coach, and it's Sonny Dykes. That's the first elephant in the room, is that you already have a head coach, one who has had success in the past. Why even go pursue James Franklin? This is, and I want to be clear, I do not know how hot that Sonny Dykes' seat is. I do assume there's probably a little bit of warmth on that. I'll say that, but it's something that we're going to completely dive into on Wednesday's episode when we have Sarah Smith on the show. So be ready for that. That's a little bit of previewing for the future. But what I can tell you is after TCU lost to Kansas State, the conversation of letting go of Sonny Dykes began to go rampant on my timeline. And I'm actually glad that I didn't do a post-game show, right? Because I think I might have tried to get into this and not been able to fully delve into it, not be able to dive into it the proper way. And now that we have the James Franklin component, things get a lot more interesting because it's no longer just about Sonny Dykes. It's now about, can I get James Franklin? And that's a different conversation. See, you might sit here and you may be calm with Sonny Dykes when nothing else is on the table. But now the hottest college football prospect as far as coaching goes that you'll probably find in the next couple of years. I think that Boise State didn't have the year to replicate last year. I think that USF, you would think that maybe a G5 coach who is just surging could be someone who pops up as a hotter candidate because they're on the uptick as opposed to already kind of solidified themselves. But I don't know if that guy pops up in the next year or two. So James Franklin is probably going to be the hottest football prospect, or the hottest coach on the market for the next 2 seasons, depending on when he decides to hop back into football. And let's quickly dismiss this elephant in the room. If you want James Franklin, you go get him. And you don't care what the ramifications are with Sonny Dykes. That's just the guy's honest truth, because you don't even want James Franklin if you're completely satisfied with Sonny Dykes. I think that's the part that needs to be clear. You can be okay with who you currently have, but not be completely satisfied with who you currently have. The reason I say that, and I want to make that distinction, is because you could like Sonny Dykes. You could like Sonny Dykes. I want to be careful with my words. You could like him, but not really like him, and for sure not love him, and still go pursue James Franklin because he's the type of coach that I feel like will take you up and make you a premier program. And we'll talk about what that means. I don't know what the buyout is. I think that wasn't disclosed, if I'm not mistaken. Last time I checked, that I didn't see it was disclosed. So you eat the buyout, whatever it is. If you got James Franklin on the table, you eat the buyout for Sonny Dykes. Treat it like a side dish. You are going to take that buyout, deal with it, and go get a coach who can elevate you up another status, because that's the clear reason you're doing it. It's the clear reason you're doing it. But the reason that people are dissatisfied with Sonny Dykes is the other, in my opinion, elephant in the room ish, right? Elephant in the room ish. Let me also say this. Sonny Dykes, let's say you decide to hold on to him for a year. We don't want to take that buyout. We want to wait a year, give him another year to run. I don't think that disqualifies you from James Franklin, because I would not be shocked to see him take a year off. I'll say that too. So the timeline is very fluid. The obstacles that feel like obstacles aren't necessarily the tallest. And if I'm not mistaken, Dykes' contract runs out in 28. So you would really just have to pay him for that 27 and 28 season if you get rid of him after next year. And that 1 year, he may show you exactly who he was that first season. He may show you the flashes that TCU has shown in 2025 specifically are things that can be sustained over the entirety of the 2026 season. It just gives you another year to really evaluate, but you don't ever have to take your eyes off of James Franklin. Yeah, like the girls be liking to say, don't let your boyfriend stop you from finding your husband. I've heard that one quite a bit. This is how I would approach the TCU situation. Don't allow your current coach to keep you from finding the coach that can elevate you into being a premier program. But those words, elevate you into being a premier program, I believe kind of lean into the second elephant in the room. Why did James Franklin get fired from Penn State? James Franklin got fired from Penn State because he struggled to win the big game. But what does that look like in the Big 12? That's the question. One of the things that we talked about on the squad show was the desire for a premier team in the Big 12. We know what that is in the Big 10. You've had Ohio State. You've had Michigan. Now you have Oregon coming in. Looks like Indiana may be that team as well, but ain't have to see that. So whatever. But you're looking at, who is the Ohio State? Who is the Michigan? Who is the Oregon that resides in the Big 12? It doesn't exist. So when I asked the question of James Franklin's biggest struggle, and here's the funny thing about it, is James Franklin has had a lot of success with Penn State. However, his tenure, without a doubt, is defined by his shortcomings. His tenure on the national level, I can't tell you how they feel out there in Happy Valley, but on the national level, James Franklin's tenure with Penn State is largely defined by giving establishment to that program early on. But I think most people focus on the fact that he has not been able to win the big one. But what does winning the big one look like in the Big 12? Because you don't have an Oregon, you don't have a Michigan, you don't have an Ohio State. So is he able to establish TCU, or maybe he goes to Oklahoma State, whatever? If he comes to the Big 12, is James Franklin able to establish his program as a perennial contender? Championship winner on multiple seasons? Is it going to be a playoff team? Does he elevate you to being a championship team? Because not winning the big one is a little bit different than not being able to beat the best. They're very similar, and oftentimes they go hand in hand, but they are not the same. Penn State simply could just not be better than those teams on most years. I'm sure there's years where they were and they came up short, but on most years, they could just not be better than that team. I think there's a chance that James Franklin, with everything that he has built, he's had a quick ascension at Vanderbilt where that team was in the dirt and he helped them rise. He had a long-standing season or long-standing career at Penn State that he had multiple opportunities to make the playoffs or be a Big Ten championship team. He's had those teams in the running for that on multiple years. There is a strong chance that he could come in and establish whoever he goes to as the best team in the Big 12. And I'm going to tell you the God's honest truth. If I was James Franklin, I would think about going to the Big 12 because the Big 10 has a big dog. They got a couple of teams that run that yard. The SEC is the SEC. The ACC, I think it's for the taking, but right now Miami looks like a big dog. The Big 12 is the one conference without a team that is undisputedly the top dog in this conference on a multiple year basis. Texas Tech looks like that in 2025, but they weren't that in 2024. Who knows if they'll be that in 2026? I think the intrigue of going somewhere where you kind of can mask your biggest concern for the majority of the season is a very enticing opportunity. And I think it's enticing for whoever picks him up. It is, because he doesn't have a good record against AP top 25 teams. And maybe that continues in the Big 12. And the tough part about that is that if you go to the Big 12 and you lose the top 25 game, it's not the same as losing the top 25 game in the Big 10, because you don't get that leeway, you don't get that grace, you don't get that leash. You lose a top 25 game in the Big 12, it feels a lot different to the people who are making the decisions on whether or not you make the playoffs. Those are the elephants in the room. What kind of program are you? I was reading an article and they called James Franklin the ultimate floor raiser. And it was actually used as a compliment. Though when I heard it, I couldn't help but feel like it was a tad bit backhanded. Not intended to be, but it just felt like it was. Because I don't necessarily want somebody who raises my floor ever. I want somebody who raises my ceiling. And I understand the difference between the two, the attractiveness of both of them. But I'm a person who would want you to raise my ceiling. Don't raise my floor. Allow me to, I was going to get personal to just a pure relationship basis. But I wouldn't want somebody who says, yeah, TCU is always going to be this. I don't know if TCU needs that right now. I don't know. I think that's the type of language that is extremely attractive to teams that have no level of success over the last, 10 years or so. And I know TCU had that year. I just feel like, I don't know, just doesn't feel necessarily where they are to want a floor raiser. That being said, I think he's also a ceiling raiser. I'll also say that. I think he is also a ceiling raiser for a team like TCU. I think when you're looking at James Franklin, he can take a team at the very bottom and elevate you to being a mid-tier. I think somebody in the mid-tier, he can take you to being a top tier. I don't know, and this is where the floor raiser comes in, if you can take a team that is bubbling around that top tier, maybe slightly underneath, if you can take them from that and being a championship team. I think that is the biggest question for James Franklin. Now, do you want that? Are you okay winning the Big 12, 4 out of 5 years, 3 out of 5 years, but struggling to make noise in the playoffs because once you face those top tier teams, he struggles to win those games. I think that there's downfalls to both of them. I think there's downfalls. You don't know if he is a championship winning coach, but you know he has everything else before that. How enticing is that to you? Those are the questions. I don't have the answers. That's all for what you can decide. But right now, the first elephant of Sonny Dykes is still in the room. Once you hire James Franklin, the second one comes in. So let's just break it all down as the process goes. Sonny Dykes, I don't know how hot his seat is, but like I said, Wednesday, Sarah, we will talk about that. But let's push forward because it ain't Wednesday yet. It's still Monday. And I want to break down the turning point of this game, the moment in which I knew it was all over, the moment in which I knew this game was done for TCU. Let's get into some breakdowns of the Frogs versus Wildcats as we continue with Locked On Horned Frogs. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch. This episode of Monarch's Moving the Game Forward is for those who believe it's not just about playing the game. You do more than just try to put points on the board. That's not what this moment is about. It's about moving crowds, moving culture, and keeping the game moving forward. TCU lost versus Kansas State this weekend. However, there was still a moment in which the game was moved forward, and that is the long touchdown pass to Eric McAllister from Josh Hoover that felt a lot like the injection of life for people. And we're going to talk about that in segment 2. But it felt like the injection of life for people in which they're like, TCU could come back. These are the moments that move the game forward. And when you follow what moves you, the unexpected is only the beginning. And just like there's more to every highlight, there's more to a Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On Horned Frogs, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. If you're a second listen, make sure you're checking out the Locked On Big 12 show. I'm sure that at some point we'll be talking about this game on that network, or on that show. It's just a matter of time. I thought it was a big time game, big time ramifications, and it's a game that was over the minute that Josh Hoover threw the pick six. We got new graphics. We got new videos. We upping the score. Let's talk to him real quick.
Time to reveal where the game was won or lost. It's the turning point.
Yeah, we got new graphics, man. Shout out to Ross Jackson, host of Locked On Saints. I seen this on the show. I said, I need that. And he said, I got you. So I'm excited. But this was the turning point. Man, let's play one more time.
Time to reveal where the game was won or lost. It's the turning point.
All right, enough playing with the graphics now. The turning point of this game was Josh Hoover's pick six. It was. I know that you have to wait until the clock hits triple zeros. I know you have to wait until overtime is over if you get to that. But this game was done with 25 minutes and 28 seconds left on the clock. It just was. It was over in the beginning of the third quarter. And it's not necessarily about the score of what happened when the pick six happened. You were only down 14 points. You were only down 14. That was definitely a margin that you could come back from. The problem is we're not talking about what could happen. We're not only talking about what did happen. I'm taking a step back to tell you what I believed would happen. And that is TCU wasn't coming back once I saw the beginning of the next drive. The response to a pick six is always important. How you respond to that can be pivotal. Do you come out and do you whimper? Do you come out and do you fight back immediately, deliver a strike? Do you show that it didn't faze you? TCU threw a pick six, right? Because I was just going to say TCU had a pick six, but that sounds like the defense had it. That sounds like it was a positive play. No, Josh Hoover threw a pick six, and it was a bad pick six. It is what it is, though. It is what it is. At this point, you move on and you try to respond. But before TCU could even respond, they have back-to-back procedural penalties. I'm not just talking about you snap the ball first down, you had a hold, and now you just back up. No, you have a delay of game and a false start. You don't even snap the ball, and you're in 1st and 20. How do you come off of a pick six and have a delay of game? That's something that, I mean, we can talk about the play calling. We can talk about the usage of Clamoring Barnes and Eric McAllister, which we will do on tomorrow's episode. Matter of fact, we will open up with that unless something crazy happens. That will be the first thing that we talk about on Tuesday morning. We can have all of those conversations. However, there's certain things that I think get skipped over. Like after a pick six, after a change of possession, after you come off of a kickoff, how do you not know what play you're going to run? How do you not have things in order to where everybody knows what's happening? You should never get a delay of game on your first play of the drive. That should never happen. That is unacceptable, and that is on coaching. Whether that's on Dykes, whether that's on Browse, you can put it on Josh Hoover as the leader of the team on the field. I don't care. But having a false start and a delay of game on your first two plays after the pick six is the moment that I realized this was over. It was at that moment I said, TCU is out of this game. They're not here. They're not here. I thought that there was competitiveness throughout it. I thought that there was mistakes. I thought all of these things existed. But you in that moment had an opportunity to show, are you this or are you that? Are you in this game? Are you checked out? Do you feel defeated? And when I see Sonny Dykes doing this, for those who are on the audio side, I have my face in my hand. When I see Sonny Dykes doing this, for those who are on the audio side, I am gripping the bridge of my nose. Anytime somebody grips the bridge of their nose, that's peak frustration. I'm either trying not to lose it or I've already lost it. Like this, and I'm trying to calm down. These are mannerisms. These mean things. As somebody who often grips the bridge of his nose, I understand what that means. I can't say I'm a face in the palm guy. I'm more of a you're lost for words. Once you start pulling this out, once you start grabbing the bridge of your nose, once you start just closing your eyes, looking down, this is a point of frustration that I don't know if completely can be articulated in words, but every person who has seen that facial expression knows exactly what it is. Let me calm down. Let me chill. Let me chill. Let me chill. This is the moment where I said Sonny Dykes' nose is over. This was the moment where I said it was over. Because like I said in the beginning, it's not about the pick six. It really isn't. It's about that being the turning point of the game and the immediate aftermath of it. Because pick six down 14 points, I mean, realistically, you could come back from that. You could. And I thought they would. until they had 2 untimed penalties. It's not like I said, 1st and 10, you ran the ball. Dang, Kavorian Barnes got 15 yards on it. But you had a holding by the left guard. Now you got to come back in this 1st and 20. I would almost accept that. It'd be frustrating because you just took away a big play. You need a big play after a play like that. You need something that's going to not silence the crowd, because the only thing that could silence it was a deep shot touchdown. But you need something that's going to say, we're still here, and steady yourself. Instead of steadying yourself, immediately after the pick six, they had a delay of game, which I think is absolutely inexcusable. And then you had a false start. So now you're in 1st and 20, never snapped the ball, and you're facing you're behind the sticks immediately after your pick six happens. Tell me they wasn't there. That's what it tells me, right? Then after that drive flames out quickly. You go in and you allow Kansas State to have a touchdown. Now you're done. Now you're down 21 points. Yeah, wrap it up. I'm be honest with you, wrap it up. I knew it was over. I began writing this topic after that touchdown. So one could argue that the game was over at that point, but no. I think that turning point, what did it say?
Time to reveal where the game was won or lost. It's the turning point.
I promise I won't be as obnoxious next time I use this. This is the 3rd time. I'll only use it once in other segments. But I might, if you watch Invincible, this is kind of my Invincible. Every time that I say the word turning point, I just want to play the video instead of saying the word. So this is like Invincible. If you don't watch Invincible, I apologize for the inside joke, but the title sequence plays every time they're about to say his name in the beginning of the show. So, anywho, this was the turning point of the game. It was at this moment that I think all the wheels began to fall off. I think Sonny Dykes was well aware that the wheels were falling off. I think that I was well aware that the wheels were falling off. In this, everything immediately after, the aftermath that happened immediately was just, I don't want to call it the cherry on top, because that's typically reserved for sweet things, but that was the thing that really closed the door. That was what really slammed the door on hope. Now, that's not to say that there wasn't other moments of hope throughout the game. Like that, it did exist. Specifically when Eric McAllister had his long touchdown, I think that you probably felt like, oh, on one play, 75-yard touchdown, they might be back in it. It's a 14-point lead. Or 14-point deficit if you look at it from TCU. 10 minutes left. That's able to come back. And I'll tell you the truth. I stopped typing. I did. I stopped typing when that happened. I said, it'd be really good if I could stop typing right now, which I was able to do because, free will. If I could stop typing right now and be able to come to you on Monday, if I could come to you on Monday and say, this is what I was going to say, but TCU made a miraculous comeback that I didn't see coming. After the pick six, this is where my mental was. So I wanted to keep those notes. I sometimes like it. I go back and forth on whether or not to take, large notes or just jot down different thoughts throughout the game. Sometimes I start typing topics because things just pop out to me. And this was one of those times. I like doing that because it allows me to give you real-time stream of consciousness on the show. It allows me to tell you this is exactly where my brain was at. This is when changed. Like I like doing those things. And this gave me an opportunity to do it. That being said, it's not what happened. And I hate that I didn't trust my gut, because the hostility in this environment, in my opinion, is the reason that it didn't happen. It was the reason I had no faith that it would happen, but it's the reason that we're going to get into in segment 3 as we continue pushing forward with Locked On Horned Frogs. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, and the NFL season is here. FanDuel doesn't want you to miss this offer that they have. $300 in bonus bets for any new customer if their $5 bet wins. That's ridiculous. I remember starting this off either late July, early August, telling you they don't do this often. They don't stick around for long. Here we are in mid-October and they're still running with it. I don't care. This cannot last forever. And I hate to be one of those infomercial type people. This won't last forever, but it won't. It won't. You got to go take advantage of this $300, because right now this is big. Often they'll give you 100, maybe 200, but 300. If you know the game, there's nothing that makes it more exciting. There really isn't, than putting some money down and putting your money where your mouth is, and then having your mouth make more money. Whoa, boss. But like that is, at the end of the day, The most fun aspect of sports is being able to say, I know what I'm talking about, making some money off know what you're talking about. So go to FanDuel right now and be able to do that. Download the app right now to get started. Today's episode is also brought to you by Monarch Money. And most people can't name all of their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether that's 401ks, properties, investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. And that's why there's Monarch Money, because it's the all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or on your phone. Doesn't matter. This thing is always with me. So that means my financial account is always with me. One app solved it, got it. No more going to five to six apps and trying to figure out, okay, this one is for this and this one is for this. Monarch Money is for it all. So don't let this financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's the whole 12 months that you get. That's half off, 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with the code LOCKEDONCollege. As we're wrapping up today's episode and closing out, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day, making it all the way to segment 3. And I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you sincerely, because I know games get ugly sometimes after losses and people don't want to sit around and talk. But we've talked about potential new head coaches and the clamoring for it. This is not me clamoring for it, but I've heard the clamoring. So let's break down that case. I thought that was a good way to open up. We talk about the turning point of the game. No, I'm joking. I'm not going to click the button. But we talk about the turning point of the game. But the biggest pregame narrative, the thing that I knew I was going to come in here and talk about, was the hostility of playing in Kansas State. And I hate that I changed my opinion. I said that I thought TCU would lose. Did I think they'd lose like that? No. I didn't think they would lose like that. I didn't think that they would get whipped on. I thought that they would lose a close one. I thought that this game would look like Colorado. This game would look like Arizona State. This game would look like a lot of the Big 12 games in which you had close ones, I think, all but once. If I'm not mistaken, in all but one game, or not all but one game, excuse me. You had the most Big 12 games. I was thinking about TCU that has now all but one close game. But the Big 12 has so many close games across the conference, and I just thought this would be right there in it. But I thought that you would pull it out. My biggest fear was you'd be too rocked from that crowd, and that ended up being the case. I talk about how you still had a little bit of hope towards the end. But the problem is, the reason I lost hope so early, the reason after that pick six and those back-to-back procedural penalties that happen before you ever snap the ball that are completely unacceptable, the problem is, before all of that happened, you had drops. And we can have conversations about Josh Hoover. I think he has to be better. I just do. I think that over watching the year, there's been multiple times in which I just felt uneasy with him in a way that I wouldn't want to feel in the way of a player, the way that they speak about him, right? Like, I felt a little bit more uneasy than I think I should for him to elevate TCU to the heights that everybody desires, for him as an individual on an accolade level to get more than he already has. I need more from him. I need him to rise to the occasion on more occasions. But in the first half, they were letting him down. In the first half, there was drops. In the first half, he was putting the ball on the money, and they just weren't catching it. Whether that was Manjack, whether that was Ed Small, that fumble that I guess was a lateral. I thought Ed Small should have caught it. Was there a little heat on it, a little high? Maybe. I don't know how fast that ball was, but it was in his face. I thought he should have caught it. You know, we talk about the lack of awareness to not jump on the fumble or not realize that, hey, this may have been a lateral, but I think he just should have caught the ball. So, like, I'm not going to put that on Hoover, even though I'm sure that goes as a fumble for him. I'm pretty sure it will go for a fumble for him because, I mean, it was a backwards pass, so the fumble should be on him. But in the second half, I just thought there was moments. The problem is Hoover at times needs to be really good. And I think they've asked that for him on too much of an extended period of time, not giving him enough help at moments. But then when he messes up, it leads to kind of overshadowing the earlier mistakes. They weren't catching the ball well. They just weren't. And there were opportunities to move the ball down the field. Like Mazda would say, move the game forward, and you didn't. You put the emergency brake on because you dropped these passes. And then you get Josh Hoover, and he makes his mistakes later. But those drop passes are the reason I knew you weren't there. And I kind of feel like it all relates back to the hostility. It's the thing that I talked about earlier. TCU has shown that they can't play in hostile environments. I said that this was a prove-it game to show you could or you couldn't. That's the interesting thing. This was by far my biggest pregame narrative. It's the reason that I originally picked TCU to lose in close fashion, because I thought the hostile environment that comes with playing at Kansas State was simply going to be too much. Didn't think it was going to be overwhelming in the way that it was, but I thought it'd be slightly too much. It was completely too much. Dropping passes, lack of awareness, just poor coaching on that. I can't get over the 2 back-to-back procedural penalties, a delay of game after a change of possession, unacceptable, in which a kickoff happens, not just a quick change of possession, but a kickoff happens and you have a delay of game, unacceptable, right? Like, these things tell me you're mentally not there. You are rocked. You are rocked. And that's the reason I knew you would never come back. Segment 3 and segment 2 go back to, or go hand in hand. They do. They go hand in hand, because if this was a game that was flowing a little bit better for the Horned Frogs, I probably wouldn't have said I knew the game was over. It would still be I ain't going to press the button. It would still be the turning point of this game, but it wouldn't have been the moment I knew it was over. It would just be the moment that it ended up being too much to overcome. That 21-point deficit, you could overcome it with that time, but you had to be pretty much perfect. And nothing told me that TCU could be perfect, because they were rocked in a hostile environment yet again. They did it against Arizona State. You go home and you play Colorado, and that's a great revenge story. But now you got to go on the road in a place that you do not win. What is to tell me that TCU can go to BYU and beat them? What's to tell me they can do that? I mean, I think you can probably go beat West Virginia. But what's to tell me that if you play a quality team on the road, you're going to win? Not only is North Carolina not a quality team, that was also not a hostile environment. That was a celebrity gathering. That was, let's bring all the famous people out to see what Bill Belichick does. It wasn't all these crowds, they're extremely invested and they're going to make your life a living, you know what. It wasn't that. That was the case when everybody got into the stadium at Arizona State. That was the case in Kansas State. You seemed rocked. And to go back to segment two, by the time you gathered your composure, by the time that you decided you may be able to do something about it, like that Eric McAllister touchdown, it was kind of like Nick Diaz versus Leon Edwards in their fight that they had. I'm a UFC guy. Not to say that Nick was getting rocked, but he was clearly losing that fight. And when he finally made up and said, I got my shot, I'm able to rock this guy who has me up, it was too late, too little, too late. Now, it's not a direct parallel. Please don't take it as that. But the idea of you finding some sort of spark late, I think is a very comparable moment between those two. TCU found their moment with a deep shot to Eric McAllister. That was quickly snuffed out. That momentum was quickly snuffed out. But Nate Diaz found his moment with the shot that rocked Leon Edwards. Didn't matter. Too little, too late. And I think you felt that. If that would have happened right after the interception that was returned for a touchdown, we may be having a different conversation, but it didn't. And by that time, you let him go. You know why? Because you were too rocked to steady the ship when it was at its most turbulent. Is what it is. As we continue tomorrow, we'll be back talking about Kevorian Barnes, Eric McAllister, but specifically Kevorian Barnes, because I think that is the biggest indictment on Kendall Browse walking out of this game. But in the meantime, in between time, until next time that we hear each other, family, take care, stay blessed. Peace.